Now you can search for new episodes by subject matter at londonreal.tv. Brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform we use at London Real.
For that, they go back to the Civil War, when the United States, and I don't mean the Confederate States, they were treated as if they were a regular belligerent, an enemy state. But in the northern states, Lincoln, and I'm not second-guessing him, and obviously we had a complete breakdown in our government, so don't take this as Lincoln bashing, but during the Civil War, a big problem was that there was a lot of divided loyalties. So they being the Union government, the northern government, Lincoln, the United States government, had declared martial law in certain areas, and under that, military commanders had the authority to detain, make military arrests of anybody saying anything even disloyal, on up to guerrilla warfare. So there was military commissions held in places like Maryland immediately after the beginning of the Civil War. But in 1862, September of 1862, Lincoln declared martial law over the entire United States, meaning that part of the Union states, reaching as far as Eugene, Oregon, where a newspaper publisher had his newspaper shut down because he was a Quaker, and he said that we should find some way to end this war. So his newspaper was shut down, and he didn't get arrested by the military. But under martial law, it imposed an absolute duty of loyalty upon anybody under that Union territory. So even if you expressed dissent to waging the war or how it was being waged, saying words embarrassing to the government, you were in violation of martial law. And the terminology of the day was a war crime, meaning simply you were in violation of that one area of the law of war that permitted martial law. So the U.S. government today is mining those Civil War cases and extracting that sort of language, archaic language.
Do they quote them specifically on
They'll quote them specifically, except they will omit certain critical points. And I may be going into more detail than you want, but Colonel William Winthrop has been described by the U.S. Supreme Court as the Blackstone of American law. So he pointed out that under the law of war, there is what is known, and it still exists, but it's seldom applied except by the most totalitarian states, claiming that or authoritarian states claiming that they're at war with somebody, such as Pinochet's Chile. Pinochet declared he is at war with the communists, and so that allowed him to jail and execute all these extrajudicially all these supposed enemies, communists, which included journalists and others who were just critics of Pinochet. And that's the practice of authoritarian states. Well, we have now not falling totally into that, but we are borrowing those same legal principles. So the principle is that when a nation goes to war, its population immediately has, and its residents, anybody within their territory, has an immediate duty of loyalty, and it's called the law of non-intercourse. So one nation goes to war against another. Each enemy's population is the enemy of the other and can have no intercourse whatsoever with either of them. And that means any correspondence, any contact whatsoever puts you in violation of this law of non-intercourse, or anything which, again, imposes an absolute duty of loyalty. So if you're a guerrilla, the offense would be, might have been described in the military commissions as acting as a guerrilla or burning bridges, but also could include having correspondence with the enemy.
Okay. Let me come back to that.
Let me just make one.
Go ahead,
so one father in the North had sent a letter to his Confederate son. He was tried by military commission for corresponding with the enemy.
Okay.
So that's how extreme it can be.
Okay. Now, so you're comparing using those examples as similar as Pinochet, as similar as some of the things the Nazis were doing or the Stalin regime. And
so let me be clear. I'm not saying that we are doing the same things as the Stalin regime. And when you talk about, we're something similar to the Nazi regime, immediately people say, well, of course, we're not as bad as the Nazis. And they're absolutely right. The Holocaust is something entirely different. But a book I've come across is called The Dual State by Ernst Fraenkel. He was a relatively prominent German lawyer, and German-Jewish lawyer. He left in 1939, and he got to the U.S., and he wrote a book, The Dual State. And the first line in it was, Germany is under martial law, something to that effect. And what he points out is that all of the legal system of Germany was operating routinely, except for that sliver, which, as I say, was under martial law. And that is finding those enemies and disloyalty, anybody disloyal. So if you said something such as one butcher said about Hitler that, we wouldn't be short of meat if it wasn't for Hitler or something, he got picked up, put in front of the People's Court, which was a military commission, and tried and convicted and executed. Now, of course, we're not doing anything like that, but the principle. And so what is valuable about looking at Germany, and I don't mean entirely at Nazi Germany, but how a democracy can evolve from a democracy in 1919 under the Weimar Republic with authoritarian elements within it, constantly subverting that constitution and pushing for dictatorship. And that article I mentioned, Guantanamo at 10, I pointed out in there that we have prominent U.S. Law professors now from one Harvard, one University of Chicago, who have written quite extensively on the need for some form of dictatorship, unitary executive theory, as Cheney famously called it. And incredibly, these two law professors have even written, and I have it in my article, that we need to go back and look at Carl Schmitt and study Carl Schmitt's works. Carl Schmitt was the Nazi legal jurist. He wasn't a Nazi in the 20s, but he's an authoritarian German lawyer, and he eventually joined the Nazi Party. And you can see just laid out how you evolve with authoritarian elements, adopting authoritarian forms of law
so you're seeing,
into who knows what.
Okay, so there's potential parallels here happening in America.
So the parallels are the legal theories underneath it.
Okay. We take real pride in our websites and who we work with on the show, and those are the guys at Squarespace. They've been running our website londonreal.tv and our siliconreal.com for over a year now, and they are an all-in-one platform to make it fast and easy to build your own professional website or portfolio. These guys have the tech down. It's drag and drop. It is easy. I used to run a WordPress site, and I used to have to FTP audio files and all this nonsense. And now when you see these blogs that I write every week where I talk to you about my personal impressions of the guests, I literally just bust those out, drop the picture in, boom, and it's done.